Okay, let's talk about the brush tool. Right now I have a document that is just a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11 at 300 dpi. And with our brush tool, it's kind of like our shape tool. The foreground color is going to affect our brush tool. So right now you can tell my foreground color is red, my background color is white. Remember, if you wanted to reset that, you can click this little black and white square, and that will reset your foreground background color. This little arrow will switch your foreground and background color, just if you want a quick switch. So we'll do black, and our brush, when we select it, will be painting in black. So let's go ahead and select our brush tool, which is about a little over a third of the way down. It looks like a paintbrush, and we're going to click on that, and then you'll notice at the top our menu changes underneath the application bar. So you can see we have our brush tool selected, and then we have this little circle with 27 under it. That's our actual brush size. So you can see if I move my cursor over to the piece of paper, it looks like I get a little circle, and that's showing the size of my brush. Let's drop this menu down and let's look at the few different options. So first let's look at diameter, which is our brush, which you notice this 27 is 27 pixels, and this 27 is a representation of that 27 pixels for you. You can also tell that this is soft, which means there's no hard edges, and we'll look at both of these. So let's move our diameter up to, I don't know, somewhere in 100, and if I mouse over, you can see that my circle is much larger. I could go all the way up to 2,000 pixels, and now you can see that that circle icon's much larger. So that's the size of my brush. So we don't want a 2,000 pixel brush. I'm going to drop it down to maybe 150, somewhere in that range. Okay, so finish selecting 150, and just like anything else, you can type it in the box. And let's leave our hardness at 0 right now, just so that we can see what happens. So get out of this box, you just click anywhere but on your document, so on the menu bar or in the gray area. So that drops it out. And then we have this mode and opacity. We're going to leave these alone for now, but opacity is basically like transparency. So if you want, whatever you're brushing to show what's underneath it, you can mess with the opacity. The mode does similar things, but you can also you change the mode in layers. So right now we are actually painting on the background layer, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But let's actually just paint something. So I'm just going to click and drag and draw a line, and you can see I'm not holding down any keys. The first part of my line was pretty straight, and then I don't know, as my mouse moved a little bit, we had a little line. So, but you can see there's. Let me zoom in a little bit. You can see it's really soft edged brush. So let's actually change our hardness to 100%, and you'll see the difference. Okay, so same diameter, hardness 100% here. So I'm just going to click and drag, and you can see you get a really harsh shape. So basically, it's a perfect circle. So let me go back to hardness of 0 and just do one click so you can see the difference. So you can see how it kind of slowly fades into that as your hardness changes. There's a lot of times where we want to use this fading technique when we're painting on masks and other things, and we'll talk about that in another video. But just know that those are two different tools, and can really change the look of what you're trying to do. Now these tools are pressure sensitive, so if you have what's called a Wacom tablet, you can actually do like pen strokes and stuff like that. But just with the mouse, it's all the same. So no matter what you do, it's the same pressure. Okay, so if we wanted to change our diameter, we could, make a big circle. One of the best keyboard shortcuts for me is to increase and decrease your brush size. There's a bracket key. So right underneath the plus key, there's it's called a brace key. So that right brace, like right underneath the plus mark, makes your brush bigger. You can see it makes it bigger by 100 pixels at a time. Or the left brace underneath the minus key, so right next to the P key, if you click on that, it toggles and makes it 100 pixels smaller. So this would be important if you're getting in here and trying to draw something and you really want to, get a fine line, get that brush down really small, and then get that brush back up really big. It just makes it real easy to not have to go to this menu and keep changing it. So I use that quite a lot. Okay, now let's look at our layer. Like I mentioned before, this is our background layer. So this is painted on our background layer, which means there's nothing we can do with this right now as far as changing the opacity or moving it around or do anything like that. So I'm going to actually delete this background layer, and we're going to draw a few lines on a new layer. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Layer, and Layer 1's fine. All the options are fine for me for right now. You can see I get this checkerboard. What that checkerboard means is there's nothing, you see through it to the next layer. So really, we're selected on this layer, but you actually see through to this white layer. Okay, now let's actually brush something. We still have our brush selected. We're 700 pixels. We're really soft. Alright, so I'm going to brush kind of a weird shape. Alright, and then I'm going to zoom out. So there's our weird shape. Now the benefit of having this, go back and watch our video on layers, is now you can use your move tool and move that brush mark around wherever you want to move it. You could then copy this layer and make two layers and that have the same exact brush stroke. So there's a lot of benefits to using layers and really being able to manipulate your brush strokes after you make them. So the other thing I want to show you real quick is there are some really unique brush tools, and this is kind of getting advanced. I'm going to delete those two layers, and then I'm going to add a new layer, just so we start with a clean slate. If we go to our brush tool and we drop down our brushes, you can see we have a whole bunch of brushes, kind of what we call predefined brushes. The top 4 or 5 rows are pretty generic brushes, round circles with hardness either 0 or variance between 0 and 100. So those are choices we can make up here. But you'll see there's some brushes that look like charcoal, that look like leaves. Let's start with a charcoal brush. Okay, and you can see the hardness goes away because it's a different type of brush. It doesn't have a hardness. But you'll see I'm going to make this really big just so we can use it as an example. You can see I get this weird little icon, and when I click, you can see I get like a pellet kind of shape. So I click and release, I get that. Now if I click and drag this, I get like a smear of that, which is really cool. And depending on what brush you use, you can do a lot of really interesting things with that. So then you could come up here and change the opacity of this layer, and really showcase something and kind of make it more interesting. So that's a really cool feature. I would suggest playing around with all these different types of brushes. And then another thing that's a really advanced tool is so let me get out of here real quick, and I'm going to delete this layer just so that we can talk about. If we go up to Window and we go to Brushes, you get this brush dialog box. And for a lot of brushes, there aren't a lot of options. You really are going to use this for if you need pressure, you need some other advanced feature. But what I really like about this, I'm going to hide this. So now I have it over here. It's in my toggle, just like my characters panel. I'm going to hide it for just a second, and then I'm going to select a star brush. So this star right here, and I'm going to pump up the size just so we can see what's going on. And you'll see when I click and drag this, I actually get a bunch of stars, and it gives me a bunch of stars in random patterns. And this actually looks really cool when you start. I'm going to change my color of my brush. I'm going to do like a red this way, change my color of my brush again, do a blue this way. And it gets really interesting. You can make it really interesting really quick. I would actually do these on different layers so I'd have more control of them if I wasn't doing just a quick demonstration. But What I want to show you is in this layers panel, this has a scattering, so you can see what's checked when you click on a brush. So each brush will have some things checked and some things, a lot of things not checked. So this brush has scattering and has smoothing. If I wanted to, the scattering is actually how these stars are drawn. So if I want to increase the scattering, you can see it kind of gives me a preview down here, and you can see that the stars will be further away from the line that I draw. Or if I decrease it, you can see they'll be right on the line. So wherever I draw, they'll be right on the line. So let's show those two differences. So I'm just going to hide that layer real quick. So this is scattering turned to 0. You can see it draws the stars real close together. I'm going to change my color just so we can have a little variety. And then I'm going to go back to, with the same brush selected, I'm going to go back to scattering, and I'm going to turn it way up, like 500, 600%. Okay, and then I'm going to just click and drag a straight line. I'm going to try and do the same shape, and you'll see what happens. So I click and drag, and it's throwing stars all over the place. Which is really cool if you want to like create a background or something like that. And there's a bunch of brushes that have a whole bunch of advanced options that are in here. So check out your brushes, check out the brush panel, and play with these options and see what they do. So some really cool things you can do with brushes. It just takes a little getting used to and getting in there and really digging in. Alright? I hope that helped, and check out the other videos on layers and on opacity and on masking, because those are really the other areas you use the similar ideas to brush tools. Alright?